What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. So I've been on a 30-day challenge where I challenged myself to create every single Jordan from 1 all the way up to 14. Now, with all the complications and everything, I wrapped everything that I learned into multiple video series. So be on the lookout for these videos. So today we'll be going over the Jordan 1, as you can see displayed on the screen, fully from zero to hero. That is what you'll be doing today. So we'll be going over the sole, we'll be going over the paneling, how to get the holes, how to get the Nike check, everything that you need to be successful in creating this model. You will be equipped within this video. So without further ado, let's hop into the video.
The first thing we want to do is go ahead and import our images, which I've already done. After we got that down, we want to go ahead and start with a basic cube. Now, this is the fundamental of any shoe that you're going to design. You can either start with a vertice or start with a plane. I like to start with a cube because it gives me both the height and the width already there. All right, so first thing we want to do is go ahead and make some loop cuts so we can have some vertices to move. So let's go ahead and adjust these points. There you go. All right, so if your first initial loop cuts wasn't enough, just go ahead and make another loop cut so that you can adjust it so that it's fitting the shoe. Now, we don't want too many points because we'll be going over this with a subdivision modifier. All right, perfect. So now that we got our bottom, now let's go ahead and go to our side view and adjust the points till it's matching up with our reference. All right, there you go, just rotating it a little bit. Now, once that is complete, we can go ahead and extrude these up. So just looking at the sole, I noticed a few things that we cannot model this the traditional way how we do other soles. So I decided to go with a different technique, which is just taking these circles and making sure that I'm extruding them to fit along the reference image. Now I'm going to show you why this is important as we move further. So once we got that down, let's just go ahead and inset it a couple times. So what I'm doing is insetting to the groove in the insets of the actual shoe. There you go. All right, perfect. So we got all of them down. Now what we're going to do is actually, because we have the circle, now we need to connect it to the rest of the shoe. Now we want all the geometry to be flowing along the same lines. So as you can see, I'm using K for our cut tool, and I'm just connecting them all so we have good topology. That is one thing that will make or break your sneaker, having good topology. Now, as you can see, there's a weird shape on the screen. What I was doing was actually going through a couple different processes on how I can get this. So one way that I worked through it was actually extruding out the base and then just snapping it onto there so that it is correctly proportional to what I am doing. Now, once we got everything cut out with the cut tool, your loop cut, now we want to actually go ahead and select all the faces that we want to inset in. Now you could do this a couple ways. You could do this with C. You can hold down Shift and do multiple. And if you want to do loop selection, hit Control, Alt. Now we just want to select all the pieces, making sure we're not missing anything. Now, why this is important that we select everything is because when you are extruding your model, you want to make sure that everything is level. Because if you do them one by one or one section by one section, you might have a chance of not doing it correctly, where some cuts are deeper than others. So there we go. I know it looks a little janky, but there's still a couple things that we're going to do to make sure that this model comes out looking realistic. Now, once we got the extrude up, let's go ahead and start making the outer part of the sole. All right, so once we got our line, what we want to do is go ahead and extrude these points up. So now we're creating the midsole base. And then what you want to do is make sure that it is aligned with the reference images. let's go ahead and pull that. Now, looking at this slit in between the sole, that is a very easy way we can do that. We could take 2 loop cuts and push them down and then extrude those faces that we have just created. Now, with the sole complete, let's go ahead and move on to the upper. Now, in this video, I won't go truly in depth on how I sculpted the model to fit. I personally do sculpting my model before I do any modeling or anything like that, because I get a better form when I sculpt it out. So once we got our form scoped out, what we want to do is go ahead and extrude a plane, solidify modifier to make sure that we're getting that thickness to it. All right, so once we got that first panel done, let's go ahead and start working on the other panels. Like I said, I like to break these down into different pieces, and this is why the sculpting the base mesh always helps, because now all I need to worry about is just snapping it on to our base mesh that we sculpted out. So there you go, extruding it out. Now, because this panel goes behind the back heel, we could just extrude it just a little bit so that we can get that geometry overlapping. So let's go ahead and extrude. There we go. All right, so with that complete, let's go ahead and start working on the toe box. Now, this is a common issue that you're going to run into when you're making these designs. Is when you're using your subdivision, you can get these blobby, very undeveloped parts of your model. Now, in order to fix that, there's a couple tricks that I'm going to be going over with you, but one of them is just to simply add loop cuts. Now, if you're still struggling, there's a couple other things that we'll be going over, not only in this video, but with every video that will be coming out: the Jordan 1, the Jordan 2, the Jordan 3, the Jordan 4, and so on, all the way up to 14. So make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you do not miss any new update on our Jordan videos. So now, working on the toe cap, one thing that we want to do is now we have to copy one side over the other side once it's complete. Now, while doing these, one thing is that I've noticed, before you start adding your loop cuts to make it sharp and crisp, one thing you should do is copy the first side over to the other side. Now, I'm going to tell you why you need to do that, because when you're copying and you already have these loop cuts, it just becomes a nightmare and a mess. I'm telling you guys, copy first, then clean up with your loop cuts. So as you can see right here, we're just taking our sculpt brush and we're just fixing the proportion of the shoe. So now, working on that top panel, usually this happens that we just need a little bit more geometry to snap onto the faces. So right here, you can see that I'm just putting my base model into a wireframe so I can see all the panels and how each panel is interacting with each other. Now, after analyzing, let's go ahead and start making these a little bit more sharp and crisp. Like I told you, initially with your subdivision, after you're done the initial base, it's going to look a little blobby. So there's a little extra work that you need to do in order to get that realism. Now, I know you guys are looking for tips, tricks, but there is really no shortcut to this. In order to get the realism that you need for each model, you have to pay attention to the details and how everything is cohesively working together. And just adjusting them. All right, perfect. So now you can see that the model is coming to life, and the more we work on it, the more realistic it's becoming. Now, one important add-on that you should have is your modifier add-on. Now, this gives you the ability to click on and off quickly, as you can see in the corner of our right panels. All right, so the real tricky thing about shoe modeling is layering each panel on where they're not intersecting with each other, but they're sitting right on top of each other. So there's a few ways that you could do it. You could use proportional editing and grab a couple points, or you can even use the sculpt tool brush. Now, for the top toe box, instead of recreating the mesh how we did with the other panels, what we're going to do is just duplicate our base mesh and delete it. Now, this is important because later in the future of this video, we're going to actually need a highly dense mesh to do some of the designs that are on the Jordan 1. So there we go. Now we're just making that base mesh underneath that first paneling. All right, so checking this panel, we can see how it's at a V shape. We do not want that. We actually want all these points to be straight so that when we mirror this over, it's easier to merge each vertex together. So just go ahead while using proportional editing, which is a shortcut. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, nice, it is coming together. So let's go ahead and duplicate this one. And what we want to do is mirror vertices along the x-axis. And there we go. So now we just need to delete a couple points and also merge them. Once we merge them, what we need to do is actually snap the faces of the vertices that we copied over onto our base mesh. And the reason we need to do this is because, like I explained in other previous videos, shoes are not symmetrical, they're asymmetrical. If you look down at your foot is asymmetrical. Now, if shoes were made symmetrically, we could literally just model one side, mirror it over, and call it a day. But that is not the reality that we live in. So let's go ahead and snap these vertices on to where they need to be. So the way I like to do this, because of the angle of the shoe, you need to make sure that when you're snapping onto the base mesh is that your angle is important, because you could snap portions of it and it'll be all over the place. So do it piece by piece depending on the curvature of the actual base mesh that you're snapping on. As you can see right here, I'm taking this primary shape and just snapping it and then doing the back. All right, so let's go ahead and fill up these faces. So you just want to select them, hit F. There we go. And then copy the toe box also. So it's the same principle as I was telling you. You want to do it piece by piece when you're snapping this on to the base mesh. So for example, the side, you want to snap it on, then the front of the toe back, you want to snap it on, then whatever is left that's at a weird angle, we want to snap those individually. Now, this is what I was talking about, where you should, before you copy and snap to the other side, you should not be adding your supporting loops because it causes a mess. So what I had to do here, which is go back and delete those supporting loops so that it's easier to work with. So we're just gonna dissolve these edges. There we go. And then now we can merge them. But before we merge them, we have to hit Control J to join both of them together. Now, always keep in mind, when you mirror something over and you Control J, the normals aren't going to be facing the correct way. So we have to recalculate outside the whole entire mesh. Now, there we go. Now, once we got everything mirrored and everything snapped to our base mesh, then we can start adding those supporting loops. Now, in order to make the cushion for me is one of the most difficult things to make because how it's shaped. So what I like to do is just same thing with the snapping, the same principle is like do it piece by piece, then start editing them one by one. So as you can see, I'm doing that back piece, and then the part where it curves in a little bit, I'm doing that. I don't know why. It seems like the cushion should be one of the easiest things to do. I don't know if I'm just making it harder for myself, but the cushion usually takes up a good amount of time for me. There we go, and just fixing that up, that topology. Always strive for clean topology when you're doing this. There we go. Make sure there's no triangles. Now with using proportional editing, we just want to go ahead and adjust those. Now for our Nike check, what we're going to do is go ahead and select a piece of this back panel and duplicate it and just adjust it to the shape of the Nike sign. There we go, making sure we have all quads. And then same thing, going to duplicate it, then mirror it along the X global, and then we want to snap these faces onto there. Let's go rotate it just a little bit like this, not too much. Right there, perfect. Now we can go ahead and snap this. But now to further adjust it so that this piece is behind this back panel, we need to turn off snapping, because the thing with snapping, it will snap to the thing and it won't let you go past it. So we need to turn it on so we can pull some vertices a little behind this back panel of the hill. There we go. Let's go ahead and duplicate this part so that we can start making our tongue. So we can start making the tongue of our shoe. Now the tongue is very simple. I don't think that it needs much explanation. What we want to do is just have a basic shape, extrude a couple points out, make sure they're symmetrical, and then add a couple loop cuts to get the desired shape that we want. Now just straightening this out. Once we got it to both sides, let's go ahead and start extruding it to the full length of the tongue. There we go. Now what we want to do is just extrude it in. So the reason why we're moving these points is so that we can curve the tongue of the shoe just a little bit. And then want to take some of these points and make sure that they're inside each of our panels. We can just fix the points until they're fitting right inside the shoe. And then one thing we want to do is just go ahead and fix the angle of these vertices so that we can make an additional padding of the sneaker tongue. So there we go. There we go, just make a cut right there. Make that straight and then rotate it. We also want to make this straight. Hit 0. Perfect. Let's do this last one. Just slide that down. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and select these top two. So one thing we want to do is go ahead and bevel it. Now, when we're beveling, we want to add a couple more supporting geometry. There we go. And then we just want to bring this in by scaling it in. And then we want to do that for this top piece too. Bevel it, select it, and then push it in. So now you got those grooves of that padding, and once you turn on that subdivision modifier, it just looks amazing. So with that complete, let's go ahead and continue to move on to the other portions of the shoe. Now I'm not gonna go too in depth about the back tab because it's literally just a plain extruded with subdivision and a solidify modifier. And then using snapping on certain ones, and then for the pieces that I don't want snapped, just turn off snapping and then move them accordingly. All right, so now for some interesting tips and trick. Now we're creating the holes of the actual shoe. Now it took me a couple of trial and error, but I think that I got something down that looks pretty well. So all I did was just bevel out the vertices Now, once it's beveled, you'll get a hole and then you delete it. Now, you can see how it just does not look good. So what I had to do is close all the modifiers so I can work with the original base mesh and just cut a supporting loop around it. Now, what this is going to do is actually clean up the shading so it's not just terrible. So you can see the difference from the bottom and the top. So we're just gonna go ahead and do that for this one. Hit enter, and then perfect. Now we have nice holes. All right, so now I'm making holes for the other. So let's go ahead and select the points. And we're gonna go ahead and bevel them. I like to turn off the modifier so I can actually work with the original. There you go. So that's good enough right there. All right, so once we got them beveled, now what we can do is just do our cutting. Now for this final hole, we just want to adjust it so it's not too wonky looking. So let's go ahead and move these points using GG to slide our vertices. Now let's go ahead and select each hole, and we're just gonna delete it. Turn back our modifiers, and there we go. Now just further adjusting them so that they're more circular and they're not oval shaped or almond shaped. All right, so now we want to do the same thing on this side, but instead of using the cut, we're going to use a different method. Now go ahead and select our points once again. Then we want to bevel it. Now when we're beveling, before we select it, now we want to inset it. So this already creates the cuts for us. And then we could just adjust it where it looks a little bit better. All right, perfect. So now we actually need to do this process once again on this panel, which is 3 holes. So we just want to add that supporting loops and then just select them, Control B, inset, and delete. Just adjusting the point so that the holes are circular. So now you can see that the complete model is coming to life. Now let's go ahead and add in our laces. Now, I don't know why. I really don't know why laces are this complicated. If there was an easier way to do this, if you guys know, leave in the comment section below what technique you guys are using to create your laces or anything. Any process that is quicker than this would be amazing. So once we got a good amount of our laces, all we need to really do is just copy and paste them. So what I like to do is just paste one side, the left side, and then copy and paste the right side. As you can see, I'm doing right here. And just adjust them one by one. All right, so with the laces complete, let's go ahead and work on the tongue flap. Now this part is very simple. What we're going to do is just duplicate the part of our tongue, which is the top section. All right, with that complete, let's go ahead and make this Nike sign, which is very easy. We're just going to take this cube, go into X-ray mode, and we're gonna extrude the points until it fits what we need. to add a couple supporting geometry with some loop cuts so that we can get our curvature. Now, after we got the check done, all we need to do is duplicate this part. Now, this part usually goes quicker because you literally could just duplicate this part over and over and over again until you get the complete sign. So extrude that down. There you go. Now, once this was complete, I did try adding a subdivision modifier, but the same problem that we usually have is that it just crumbles the whole thing because there's no supporting geometry. Now, you have a couple options in front of you. Either you can add supporting loops, or you could just do away with the subdivision modifier. All right, so once we got our trace out done, what we need to do is just go ahead and extrude it. Now, going back to the part where we duplicated our base mesh and just deleted the part that we didn't need and kept the toe box. Now, this is why, because all these little holes, when you're working with booleans, you need geometry in order to create holes or anything in your model. So there we go, just taking a cube that's subdivided, and now we just want to go ahead and duplicate each of them. All right, perfect. So once we got them all, now what we want to do is just extrude it out so that when it goes into the shoot, it's enough geometry to actually create that effect. And we're just gonna position them now and make sure that each point is intersecting. So let's go ahead and scale it down and move it up a little bit. Right there is perfect. Just looking at our reference, making sure we're all lined up and squared away. To edit, bool tool, and now we want to do the brush boolean and want to do difference. There we go. Now you can see that it made the holes exactly where we wanted them. So I tried adding a subdivision modifier, but it just was not working with me. So I just left the holes like this and added a duplicate of the original base mesh so that you're not just looking directly into the model, but you're looking at the layer underneath it. All right, so that completes the first Jordan of our collection video, of which we'll be doing 1 through 14 each Jordan. Now, because each process is the same as the other, I'll be breaking down specific things that make each Jordan unique and how to model specific things regarding each of the Jordans. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. All right, you guys, have a blessed year.